Hello everyone, today I will be giving a quick overview on Innovaya and how we are using it in our day-to-day use for estimating. For those that don't know, Innovaya is an integrated software. It's a plugin that works directly with Revit and Timberline in order to extract data from the Revit model, which can then be in turn used to quantify and to estimate, do estimates using our Timberline databases. Like I said, today I'm just going to give you a quick overview. I'm going to run through a project fairly quickly, giving an example or two of how it actually works and how the interface works and what you need to look for when you're actually working with it. Now, the first thing, of course, you start up with Revit. Now, one key point that is very important is you do not need to have a licensed version of Revit for this to work. That only one person is allowed to use it at any given time. You do have the option to use viewer mode. Revit actually includes that. It's a secondary version that's only used to view, like it says. Now once you've located your project file, select it and always detach it from central if it is a central model. If not, of course, don't worry about it. Click on open. Now you're going to want to detach and preserve work sets. If you detach and discard work sets, you might lose inadvertently, get rid of information that would be necessary or might be necessary for your estimating. So you always just want to detach them but preserve them. All right. When you're opening your Revit file, you might receive an error message such as this one. This essentially is just saying that it cannot find the location of linked files. A lot of times when you're working in Revit, you will have the architectural file, which will focus on the structure, the walls, doors, windows, things like that. You can also link in directly MEP files, structural files, and things like that, which will essentially overlay. You don't have direct access to these files, but they do interact with your model, so you can actually see the differences, any type of, how everything is laid out, the lights work, things like that. In this case, it doesn't matter since we're not going to be reading the links files either, so you can just ignore and continue in a few minutes. You can open the manage links to correct the problem, and essentially that's just going to open up the Revit links splash page, and it's going to allow you to address or retell it where to find these files. View, so the medicine that we did here in Georgia. So I'm just using this as a quick example. Now, like I said earlier, the Innovaya is an actual integrated plugin. It would be under your Add-ins tab, under External Tools, same as Navisworks or Navisworks Switchback, or any other plugin you might have. We have other ones, but this is going to be Innovaya Composer for Revit. Now, when you click on it, you're going to get the splash page that actually helps you detail out exactly what you want to pull from this model. As far as things such as you can include areas and rooms, so you can do good proper scheduling, estimate based off of scheduling. You can do paint finishes, you can do mullions, things like that. Obviously, things like including lines is not really going to matter, or raster images. That's in this section right here. And this section is categories not to export. So basically, if I don't want to see the railing systems or the curtain systems or the columns, those will be omitted from the Innovaya file. That's sometimes, if you only want to do a specific, takeoff or a specific estimate on a specific system, then you would, be able to go through here. That way you don't waste time and resources, exporting things you're not really interested in. And the second tab, building sections and phases, this is basically where you're telling it what phases you want. Say you only want to, do new construction versus what's existing, then you can just uncheck existing. In this case, it's always good if you're just doing a general takeoff. Keep everything checked. That way you get as much information as possible. Again, then over here in the building sections, it's just asking you how it's going to name them. either based off of Revit file names, off of Revit phases, off the uniform titles, or the Revit assembly codes. Again, keeping it under Revit file names is the simplest way, so it's better just to leave that one. On the Revit files to export is where we go back to the linked file system that Revit uses. Right now, by default, this sets to the active file only, which is this one that I actually have open, the UGA VetMed. You do have the option to go to all files, which will basically include any open file. So if I were to come in and open a second project, it would actually include that in there. Now that comes in very handy when you're dealing with projects that have multiple parts to it. We're currently working on a large project which includes, multiple buildings that are linked together or joined together by a core system. But in that case, you might want to just estimate, a manufacturing part of the building or the administrative part. So to do separate takeoffs and separate estimates, you would check all files, including open and linked files, so you can actually open all the files at the same time. Or you can have one file that has all the different disciplines linked into it, such as structural, MEP, and it would actually take into consideration and pull the data from those linked files as well. Then down here, if you're selecting the all files method, you have the choice of either putting this in a single Innovaya file, where it'll have all the data and all the information under one. If you have 4 projects open, it will still only export one Innovaya file, or you can go with multiple Innovaya files. And then, of course, in that case, if you have those same 4 projects open, you would have 4 individual INV files, which you can then distribute to your estimating team. In this case, we're just going to go with the active file only. The active file obviously defaults to a single Innovaya file. Under custom properties, basically, we can actually select what fields that the data is going to focus on, or that the Innovaya is going to focus on. So if we were to select floors, it's from the floor families, it's going to pull in the family names, types, and thickness. Those are very important ones that we can either omit or include. And we have the option to add properties. So let's say I wanted to add a property of material as being something that it's going to itemize, or it's going to focus on and pull the specific data. I just create it, and that's it. It's good when we are going to be incorporating our shared parameter standards. Those that have seen the video know what I'm talking about. Those that have not, I will be making that available. Once we include the shared parameter system, that are parameters that we want to use for estimating purposes that are very specific, that help us, itemize things a little better, are very, more detailed, I will be able to literally come in here and add each one of those properties. Therefore, it will actually look for that data whenever it's actually running its process. I'll go ahead and remove that one. Sorry. Then you have other things here like miscellaneous, basically the model coordinates and the steel element properties. Steel element properties is a very important one because as of right now, there was no real way to extract the weight and the tonnage of steel from a Revit model. I mean, you'd have to go in there and do it manually by count. So, you would select an object, say a steel column, and then, see how many there were, and then you would cross-reference that to the standards table telling you, based on the type of what the weight is per unit or per linear foot. Now we actually can pull that data, which was already always embedded within Revit. We just had no way to see it. Innovaya actually will go through and pull that specific data, and we can actually see that in an easy-to-read format. And then the Tools tab is one that's more for very higher-end detailing. I will have to go into that much later. The reality is it's not one that's going to be very commonly used, so we will. I'll discuss that in a second tutorial video. So when we go back to the first page, the Elements to Export, first tab, you also have the option to merge and synchronize. Now that's important because let's say you're working on a project at schematic phase. That's at the schematic design level, and they want to run a quick takeoff to see, how much, where are we at budget-wise, what kind of, numbers are we looking at. We can run it at this point. Then, however long down the line, 6 months, 6 weeks, however long it takes, they get to the design development phase or a more, substantial phase where there's a little more detail. They've already made some more decisions on finishes, materials, construction, materials and things like that. We'd run a second takeoff. Now, what we can do is, once we run the Innovaya file, as long as we keep the files the same, you have the option to merge or synchronize. Synchronize is the one we're probably going to be using the most, because what that will do is that will create a second Innovaya file and then it will actually link that one back into the original Innovaya file, the one we did during the schematic phase. And it will actually compare and cross-check the two. So once we look at it in Innovaya, we will be able to see where they made changes, where they added walls, where they took out walls, where they changed material on the type of wall. Where the wall used to be gypsum board, now it's actually CMU because it needs to be structurally loaded wall. So that's going to be a very handy tool. It's going to color code everything inside Innovaya so we can actually clearly see in the 3D viewer what the changes were. But for right now, we'll go ahead and just uncheck that. Then you click Start. Now it's going to ask you to give it a file name. I'm going to go ahead and just overwrite this one, which I worked on earlier. Hit Save. Just replace it. And of course, place that file wherever is going to be easily accessible to the estimators, because this is the file that they will be using to do what to do their jobs. All right, once the file has been exported, it'll actually tell you, where it's saved at, and then how many actual objects it exported, all the elements that were involved. So you just click OK. This error message, I'm going to have to get back to everybody on why it's showing up. It really hasn't affected anything, so I don't know what's going on. Again, I'll just have to find out what it is, but do not worry about it. Just click OK and you can move on. All right, so once we're done here, you can just close out or minimize or whichever you want to do. And then we're going to go to Visual Estimating Timberline. This is the Innovaya software. Very important with this software. I don't know how the system is set up for each individual business unit, but as of right now, the current version of this software requires each user, whoever owns the computer, whoever computer it's installed on, that particular user must have full administrative privileges in order for the software to work properly. Again, this is just the current version. I have been reassured by the creator of the software that the future version, the next update, which will be out, disseminated to the public soon, which we will have soon, does not have this issue. He claims that the initial issue starts because the original software was written around Windows XP, which did not have the safety features that Windows 7 does. So now that it's running on Windows 7, it's creating there are some conflicts and some issues. Now you can't, like I said, you can't get around it by having full administrative privileges on your computer. So just click yes and it'll start up. This is the general interface for Innovaya. On the left-hand side, building sections. I'll explain what that is in a second. In the middle pane here, you're going to see the 3D view of the model. Once I actually import the INV file, you'll be able to see it. On the right-hand side, this is basically where it's going to tell you what falls under what within the model. It's going to tell you, how many concrete exterior walls you have, how many, curtain panel systems you have, how many doors do you have total, based on how they've been categorized within the Revit model. So whatever's been labeled as an exterior door will show up here. If something has not been labeled properly, such as exterior walls, they will fall under the other category. On this bottom right, it's going to give you the data on specific selected objects. So once I come up here, select exterior doors, I'm going to have a little more detailed information on all the exterior doors. And this pane, we're going to see specific views. If we have we select a door, we'll see that specific door in this 3D view. And then over here, we're going to have all the data and all the general information that's contained within the family or within the Revit component. So to get started, you just go to the Start tab. Click on Open Project, find out where, find that file that you saved earlier, that INV file, and let's go ahead and open it. Takes it a few minutes. Now, the beauty of it is this software will work on pretty much any computer, regardless of, whether it's a nice, hefty, BIM machine, or if it's a standard, administrative office type use machine. So, a machine with, quad core or Core 2 Duo processor and 1 gig of RAM will be more than enough to run the software. Of course, the better the computer, the better, the smoother it's going to work. Now again, here we see the building sections. The building section is how Innovaya actually breaks down everything based off of how it's set up in Revit. In Revit, things are set up by level. You have a wall that will start on level 1 and it will either continue without being connected to anything, or it'll continue to level 2 or to the roof, however it is. But its base constraint is level 1. And right now what we're seeing here is there are 798 objects within this family that are constrained to level 1. 464 to level 2, 31 to level 31 to the roof level, and 21 that are unassigned. Those are usually free-floating things that have been disconnected from the floor, or standard generic models or generic objects have a tendency to fall under the unassigned region. Now, once you click on default, like I said, there's 1,314 objects, and right here on the right-hand side, you can clearly see now that within this model there are 218 exterior walls. All of them fall under the other category because they weren't properly labeled within the Revit model. Same thing with the interior walls. Now, curtain walls, fortunately, since they are a system family, they have a tendency to be categorized a little better. So we have 152 curtain walls in this project. If you look, once you click on here, you can see that it changes in the bottom right-hand pane. It breaks down all those 90, like in this case, there's 98 interior walls that are classified as other. Well, here are the 98. There are 8 6-inch CMUs, 55 8-inch CMUs, 18 6-inch partitions, and 17 8-inch partitions. If you break this tree open, you're going to see these numbers. Now, these numbers refer to the ID numbers assigned, sometimes, usually within Revit. Revit assigns object IDs. If we actually go back to the project, I can show you that real quick. Manage. Select by ID. Now here you can actually enter a number. I'm going to just go ahead and demonstrate. It's 679 2323. Click OK, and it actually automatically highlights what that object is or what that family is. And that's that wall right there. Now if we were to look at back in Innovaya, now the 3D interface is very tricky. It does not work smoothly. I will have to say that right off the bat. I have been told that the next version, the updated version, they completely went to a different rendering engine, a completely different navigation system, so it works a lot smoother. It'll be a lot more like Revit. As you can see, according to the Revit model, that wall should be the same one. So if I were to select it here, as you can see, it highlights it in the 3D model, and then it brings it into view here, so you can actually see the individual model to its fullest. You can see that it's cut because it's been attached to the roof, which is an angled roof, so it'll have that angle. Now, when it calculates the angle, it calculates everything as accurately as possible. We have verified this information from estimators who have done, the estimator who actually worked on this project verified it with us during training classes that the amounts and the quantities that we were getting from the Revit model were within reasonable margin, and by reasonable margin I mean less than 1% difference than what is being shown here. So as you can see right here on the left hand side, we have all the general properties associated with this particular wall. If we go to quantities, it gives us all the general quantities. So basically it gives us all the area. Area double is essentially both faces. Area will be one face. Area double will be interior and exterior face. It gives you base constraint elevations. That's relative elevations to the project, however it's set up. You have calculated areas, and those are a little more complex. We really don't need to worry about those too much at this point because we're really not going to be involved with that as much. Another thing that's quite nice, it actually breaks things down by openings. So all these openings you're seeing here, whether they be doors, windows, it will actually tell you what's what. So as of right now, this has 184 square feet of openings cut out of it. So that shows us that real quick. Now the good part about this, or the important thing, is basically getting the quantities and getting it to link back to our Timberline. That's the way Innovaya works. Innovaya was created to work well with Timberline databases. So you come in, you go to the Quantities tab, you generate AMQ. To generate AMQ, essentially you're just telling it what components you want quantities of. In this case, we're going to grab the default. Now, this is mostly a drag and drop type software, so you can grab level 1, and it will only pull the items from level 1. 798, it would only count those. So as you can see, there's 94 interior walls on level 1. But if we click on default, it goes to 98. So that means 4 of them are on level 2. And there we go. You can see 4 on level 2. In this case, we'll just grab the default, drag it into this first field where it says building sections. And basically, that's going to generate quantities on every level. We can break this down by levels for when we have multiple floors. And again, that will be a discussion in a future tutorial video where I will be able to show you exactly how it shows it. And it actually color codes it and everything, so we can actually see rooms, we can see walls, we can see everything specific just to a particular floor. So when you're working on something that maybe they're doing adding a second story, well, we can just focus on that second story. So once you put the building section in there, you come to component type, and this is where we're going to pick what we want to see, what we're trying to itemize, what we're trying to get the quantities from. And again, it's a drag and drop system. So in this case, let's go ahead with the curtain walls. We have 152 of them. You drag them over here, and then you're going to have conditions. Conditions are basically parameters, fields that you want. I can actually create multiple ones. In this case, the default one is for area, and you've got a sum area, which gives you the sum total of all these curtain walls, all 152 of them, and a sum count. We want to be breaking this down a little bit more, so we're going to add fields to these columns right here. The way it works is add quantity totals gives you the sum total. So if we were to add quantity totals for base offset or calculated area side or area, it's going to give me the same thing that's got now, the sigma area. So what we want to do is to get individual parts. If I want to see the area of each individual, each of the 152 curtain wall systems, we go to to add grouping criterion and then dimensional properties. It breaks it down into general properties, which are things like assembly codes, types, comments, things like that, or dimensional properties, which is anything having to do with a dimension, be it a calculated dimension, a linear dimension, an area, things like that. So we're going to add the dimensional property of area, and as you can see, it drops it here. Let's just kind of keep this a little cleaner. I'm going to go with count up front, and then I'm going to go ahead and add the count one as well. Again, you go to dimensional properties. Excuse me. Should be general. I apologize. Apparently, count is only available under quantity total, so we'll just leave it at that. Now we hit generate, and let me go ahead and open this up a little bit more so you can see. Essentially, it took every single curtain wall that was in there, and it grouped it by name, first of all, and then it gives me a total count. So basically, we have 3 of this storefront 4-10. Each individual section is going to be 93.33 square feet, giving me a grand total of 279.999 square feet. And it's going to go like that for every single one. And obviously, if you've got single units, you can only see that, but it's going to itemize, and it's going to give you grand totals for everything. Now, it's going to go under everything that has a, type or a category type of curtain walls. So here, you're going to see things such as storefronts. You're also going to find things that might be undefined. The beauty of it is, once you have these things and you click on them, as you can see, they're popping up on this left-hand window. Shorten this up a little bit so you can see that clearer. We've got spandrel infill. Well, it's going to show me these are all the spandrel infills that are being counted here, which is 8 of them. Again, I apologize for the interface. It's not the best. Mechanical louvers. And it also highlights them in the larger model as well. We've got 2 mechanical louvers, and there they are. And as you can see, they're kind of the red part right here. If I switch to a different one, that goes away. Get back to the red here and here. All right, so once we have these quantities, we want to insert them over here into our managed quantities. So basically, you just select Insert All, and there we go. The easiest way to look at this is then sort by component, because then we're only going to see what we just input into the system. You break this open a little bit, and here we go. We can see it's the same list that we had. Now it's just kind of set up by alphabetical order. So it starts with, curtain wall north 2, define none, define none. There's 2 of these. And here we see the same information that we saw in that previous window. Now it's just one at a time as opposed to as a group. So once this is done, you're going to go into Timberline and create a new estimate. Now everything's going to work directly within Innovaya. You don't have to. You can, but you do not have to open up Timberline to make this work. So you click estimate. It's going to ask you to give it a new name, or create a new name for this particular estimate. We're just going to go with Innovaya tutorial. And then it's going to ask you for the database path. The database will be assigned by your lead estimator or whoever is in charge of creating and distributing the databases. Ideally, if you have one centralized database, it's better. It makes it a little easier for everybody. But I know isn't necessarily the case every single time. So you just pick where it's at. In my case, I've actually got it on my local machine, and then you hit OK. And it's asking me that it already exists. So if you have multiple estimates that you're trying to do and you don't want to overwrite them, then I suggest you change the name. In this case, go ahead and overwrite it. All right. So now officially Timberline database, the database that I specified, is now linked with this project, and it's linked with the estimate file, new estimate file that I created in the Innovaya tutorial. Once that is done, you can go into takeoffs, and then there's many different ways you can do this. You can do it by assemblies, you can do auto takeoff, an assembly takeoff, a quick takeoff, an item takeoff. For this one, I'll go ahead and do the assembly takeoff. Now the differences, the difference between the assembly takeoff and an item takeoff is the assembly will include everything. Let's see if I can get the one. Now these databases have to be correct. Obviously they have to be set up properly. The database that I'm working with right now is kind of a test one, so it might not have all of the things that I need in order to make this work properly. So let me go ahead and close out of this one. I'll go ahead and show an item takeoff first. So item takeoff is a little more clear. Now again, it's going to use the same stuff, it's just the way it's set up. There was no assembly takeoff for a curtain wall system, but I do know they are in here. There we go, curtain wall and glazed assemblies. Now, the way this works, essentially, again, drag and drop. You're going to take whichever object you want. So in this case, we'll take curtain wall north 1, and we'll drop it into the MQ side. And now we're going to see how many. There's only one of those. There's an area of 364. And then we're going to double-click on, open up the glazed curtain wall, and then we're going to choose the type. So in this case, we have stock minimum, single glazed average, double glazed average, aluminum stock maximum. So we're going to go with double glazed average, assuming that this is going to be a double glazed system. We're going to drag, it's going to ask for things like width and height. We can add them here, or we can simply drag the areas that we have down to this level, and it's basically going to automatically set everything up. Once everything is there, you check off this, and it's going to verify the information that the information is matching, and then you click takeoff. Now once you click takeoff, you can see over here the icon changed. It actually has a little $sign on it. That is just letting us know that that particular item has already been taken off. And then here we can actually see curtain wall and glaze systems. It's going to give you a description of what it is, the quantity, which is 364 square feet, unit cost, labor cost, and every other cost that's basically associated within the Timberline database, to give you a grand total of 22,156. Essentially, we just did an estimate for this one wall. Now, there are ways to go through, and I will explain this at a later time, of copying the mapping. The mapping is what we did when we actually created the first one. Let me select the next one. I'll show again. We do item takeoff. When we create these things here, we're essentially mapping everything. We're basically telling it that, okay, you're going to go back from here to here. As you can see, when I dragged it in here, it automatically added the phase, item description, and description and quantities. It automatically did that because I did that to the initial one. Let's see. doing quantity of 1. We can actually drag that over, quantity of 2. And double check that. And now let's see. If we do a takeoff, that one should be taken off as well. Okay, this needs to be verified because it was a quantity of 2. I think I missed a field when creating the things initially. Let's drag this back in here. Yes, I need to include things such as length or width in order to create this. Here, if we go here, close this out, go to curtain walls. Now it's automatically showing us the 2 that have already been taken off. Let's go to manage AQ. We're going to do this again, and we're going to add 2 more fields. I'm going to go ahead and add quantities, grouping criteria and dimensionals. We're going to add length and calculated height. Just going to add length and generate. Now it's going to be the same thing, so we're just going to re-enter it. And essentially now it just, now we go to takeoff again, item takeoff. I drag across. And we actually brought in 2 new ones. Just roll the selected one. I'm going to remove all of these. Now we generate MQs. Again, level or default. Current walls. Now I'm going to add those fields. Dimensional property of height and length. And standard area as well. I'm actually going to save this as default. And this is going to be the default, so whenever I do this condition again, it will always give me these fields. Generate, same as last time, insert all. Component types. Now these have already been eliminated from the original mapping, even though we're seeing this right here. It will no longer be. You can see now that's completely gone. So again, we go back to takeoff, we do item takeoff. We drag in CW North 1. And now we see that we have length, height, things like that. So we can actually drag that into length over here, height over here. As you can see, it's actually calculating all the square footages. If we were to change this to 2, I don't think it was possible. Back to 1. And we're going to take off. Again, you see the $sign has shown up, so now it's taken off. Now again, it's using the same database I used last time, so everything should be accurate. Take off. Quantity is 1. Okay, there we go. Now it updated properly at 364. Let's do the same thing for the second one, CW North 2, seeing as that one actually has 2. Now here you can actually drag the quantities over to 2. It automatically, as you can see, pulled in the length and the height based on what I did last time. And then this area actually needs to be updated to that. Now we add pass, and again, refresh this. Okay. There we go. So, as we just saw, when dealing with this side, which is basically what it's reading from the Timberline database, always keep this quantity at whatever it defaults as and verify that the quantity here matches the quantity here. This is the total area, the calculated area, sum of. So it's actually going to give you the total sum for these two counts. Now, these two counts are accurate. When you do the add pass, that's what that's verifying is that all this information is showing properly. So what it does is it takes this square footage, regardless of what the quantity says here, and it makes sure that it matches this quantity that says here. Now, if we wanted to up this to say, hey, we're adding 4 of these instead of just 2, then we can sit here and add double. And what it'll do is it'll double this number. So when you change don't change the quantities here, because what it'll do, so you can see right there, variable numbers or total values of all the objects in the MQ quantity should usually be 1. So regardless of what it says here, this number should always be 1 because it's only going to do, it's one count of this quantity. Again, so I'll repeat myself. The quantity value here represents the total amount of values here. So if it says 4, in this case, I'll go ahead and do another example here in a minute, this should still say 1. If you multiply, if you do this, say you put 2 here, what that's going to do is it's going to multiply the values it's calculating times this value. So, and this value right now is showing that there are 2. Each one is 816 or 812 square feet, giving you a grand total of 1624. It already knows this. So one of these is what's going to show up here, and it's what's going to show up in the estimate. Here, go ahead and take off that one, and I'll show another example of that with a different number. And then here we have the total cost of this one unit. Let's go with the mechanical louvers for the next one, because that's 10. Again, takeoff, item takeoff. Drop that in there. As you can see, there's value of 10. Now each of these 10 is going to represent everything. So we have 112 square foot per unit. Since there's 10 of them, there is a total of 1,120 square feet. When we drop this in here now, as you can see, it's not registering the data that I had here, the data that I have here, because I've never done one of the mechanical louvers before. We're going to go ahead and just use the same one. Let's say aluminum stock minimum. And again, see, you've got quantity, length, and width. Now we can drop the length in here and then the calculated height over here. Now, we're looking at 1. It'll be times 10, so when we hit add pass, it should give us the same square footage that we actually have here. And it does. It's giving you, actually no, excuse me, it's giving me just the individual one. So we need to drag the total quantity down here. Do the add pass again, and it's actually totaling it up. Okay, let's just go ahead and do that, take off. And there we have our total. Total cost for this, again, 1,120 square feet times whatever the unit cost is, gives us our grand totals. Aside from the individual takeoff, there's also the assembly takeoff. The assembly takeoff is ideal for objects when you're or for things like such as footings, foundations, concrete work, things like that, things that require a lot of bits and pieces and nuts and bolts that aren't usually included within the Revit model. When you're doing a Revit model, you're drawing your footings and you're drawing your foundations. You don't include things such as rebar or ties or anything like that. When you're doing a CMU wall, you usually do not include things such as grouting or, again, the steel reinforcement. Assembly takeoff actually allow you to do those things. It basically breaks it down by however you have your assembly set up inside your Timberline unit. So again, we are going to we're going to close this out real quick. I'm going to generate another MQ. This one is going to be specific to masonry walls. We'll just use that one because it's easier. I've noticed on previous use that the interior walls here are a few masonry ones. And again, we have detail, conditions. So it gives us a width, calculated height, total length, total area side, which we do not need, so we can actually remove that column. Total volume geometry, we do not need that one as well, so we can remove that. So total count, which we can use. We're going to go ahead and add standard area, or sum of area, excuse me, and then we're also going to add the standard area just for double checking purposes. And we are going to add, I think that should be it for right now. That would actually work. Let's go ahead and bring that here. Okay, let's go ahead and add single length as well. Okay, now we're going to save this one. Wrong button. Right click and set save current condition. Let's go ahead and rename this CMU. And we're going to generate. Now again, similar to the curtain walls, we just hit insert all, and then this will actually process. And now we have curtain walls and interior walls other. Go ahead and close out. Now we can see all the different CMU walls that have been included in here. Now we do an assembly takeoff. It's a very similar process. You're going to grab your CMU wall from here. In this case, 6-inch, 4 6-inch CMUs. Now you're going to see it's automatically doing this because earlier I went ahead and added the masonry assembly, but you would just go into masonry and then pick whichever type, interior masonry in this case, core partition wall. You double click on it, and all this is going to populate all this standardized data. So once you're here, you can actually grab calculated height, drag it over here to wall height. It's actually already automatically doing it. Let's see, linear footage, which is the actual length. In this case, it's giving me total because we have 4.04 linear feet amongst 4 walls, so it's giving me a grand total of it, which is fine for this case. Here's the sum total, which is 1616, so that'll actually match that. Then once this is all said and done, it's pretty much good to go. You hit takeoff, but here you can actually see that it's going to count for joint reinforcing. It's going to count, take into consideration, horizontal re-steel, vertical reinforcing steel, and how much of it, in this case, 0.250 pounds per foot that we're going to need for this amount of CMU wall. And it automatically, takes these into considerations based off of how your database was created and set up. So once you hit takeoff, close this out, you're actually going to see here's your total cost for creating these 4 6-inch CMU walls. It's going to give you the quantities in cubic feet, of grout. It's going to give you the poundage of steel that you need and the price per labor to install them and everything, just like you would in a regular Timberline database. Once this is done, you can actually open the estimate in Timberline itself. I'm going to go ahead and try to open it. I'll be honest, I actually have issues connecting to Timberline every once in a while, so if it doesn't work, I apologize. But you can actually open this directly in Timberline if that's what you're more comfortable working in, and you can actually see what it was or how it was that it broke it down. And then again, in a future video, what I'm going to show is how to map all of these, because right now we have 3 different 6-inch CMU walls, actually 8. It separates them for whatever reason. I don't know the specifics in this case. I don't know the specifics to why it separated them, but it does. What we can, since they're all essentially the same, the construction is going to be the same, the database is, the values that are in the database will apply to all of them equally. You can actually copy one and then apply that to the other 2, which in like the case of the 8-inch CMU that we're seeing here, which we have quite a few, copy it and apply it to all of them, and it would automatically price all of them out for you. So again, like I said, once you actually copy this, you can actually paste it to all of them, and all of them would be automatically estimate, give you at least a good starting point somewhere where you can start off. If anybody has any questions, they may feel free to contact me.